The morning sun cast long shadows across the command deck of the UES Defiance as Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the daily reports. 300 years had passed since humanity first reached the stars, and now they called dozens of worlds home. The ship floated in the darkness between Earth and Mars, conducting routine patrol duties that had become almost boring. Jake sipped his coffee and watched the stars through the main viewport. At 42, he had spent half his life in space, working his way up from a junior officer to commanding one of Earth's most advanced warships. The Defiance was humanity's pride, equipped with fusion drives, particle beam weapons, and the best crew in the fleet. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. Her voice carried a note of concern that made Jake set down his coffee cup. Amy had been with him for 3 years and rarely worried about sensor ghosts or space debris. "What kind of readings?" Jake asked, moving to look over her shoulder at the display screen. "Multiple contacts, sir. Large ones. They just appeared at the edge of our sensor range, moving toward Earth." Amy's fingers danced across her controls, trying to get a clearer picture. "I've never seen ships this big before." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of service, no alien species had ever made contact with humanity. They had found signs of ancient civilizations on distant worlds, but never encountered anyone still alive out there among the stars. "How many contacts?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension in his chest. 12 ships approaching Earth, sir. 8 more near Mars, and our colonies are reporting similar contacts." Amy turned to face him, her young face pale with worry. "Captain, these ships are enormous. Each one is at least 5 times the size of the Defiance." Jake moved to the communication station and opened a channel to Earth Defense Command. "This is Captain Morrison aboard the Defiance. We have unidentified vessels approaching Earth. Request immediate orders." The response came back within minutes, but it felt like hours. Admiral Roy Campbell's gruff voice filled the bridge. "Morrison, get your ship to Earth immediately. We have a situation developing." As the Defiance raced toward Earth, Jake watched the alien ships grow larger on his screens. They were unlike anything humanity had ever built, with smooth curves and a strange blue glow that pulsed along their hulls. The ships moved with purpose, taking positions around Earth like they owned the solar system. On Earth, Dr. Alina Rodriguez sat in her laboratory in Geneva, staring at the data streaming in from observatories around the world. As Earth's leading expert on possible alien life, she had dreamed of this moment for years. But now that it was happening, she felt only dread. The alien ships had appeared everywhere at once, surrounding not just Earth, but every human colony. That kind of coordination suggested they had been watching humanity for a long time, learning about their defenses and settlements. This was not a peaceful first contact mission. Elena's computer chimed with an incoming message from the Emergency Council. World leaders were gathering in the secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps, and they needed her expertise immediately. She grabbed her research files and headed for the door. Knowing that everything was about to change, the alien message began broadcasting on every frequency at exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time. Jake watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the transmission appeared on every screen, interrupting regular communications across the solar system. The creature that appeared on the screen was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. It wore elaborate robes that seemed to shift color in the light, and its voice was cold and mechanical when it spoke. "Inhabitants of the worlds you call the Sol System, I am Warprime Kethfer of the Zephyrian Collective. We have observed your species for many cycles and have determined that you pose a threat to galactic stability." Jake felt his hands clench into fists as he listened to the alien's words. Around him, his crew stood frozen, hanging on every word of humanity's first contact with an alien species. "Your species inhabits what we classify as Deathworlds," Kethfer continued. "Planets with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, and dangerous wildlife. Only the most savage species can survive in such conditions. Your expansion into space threatens the peaceful order we have maintained for 10,000 years. It's the aliens." Image flickered slightly, and Jake noticed that other members of its species stood behind it, all wearing similar robes and watching with those large, dark eyes. We offer you one opportunity to avoid extinction. Surrender all your worlds to the collective within 72 hours. Your species will be relocated to reservation worlds where you can live under our protection. Refuse, and we will cleanse your death worlds of all life. The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew stood in shocked silence. In 3 days, humanity would either surrender its freedom or face a war against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, the Emergency Council convened in a room that had been built to withstand nuclear war. President Lisa Hamilton of the North American Federation sat at the head of the table, her face grim as she looked around at the other world leaders. "We've all seen the transmission," she said, her voice echoing in the underground chamber. "The question now is how we respond." Prime Minister Chen Wei of the Asian Alliance leaned forward. "These aliens have technology far beyond ours. Their ships appeared without warning, and they know about every human settlement. Fighting them would be suicide." "So would surrendering," replied President Hamilton. "Reservation worlds sounds like prison camps to me." Admiral Campbell entered the room, still wearing his uniform from the emergency session at Defense Command. Behind him walked Dr. Rodriguez, carrying a tablet filled with her analysis of the alien transmission. Asked President Hamilton. Dr. Rodriguez activated her tablet, projecting images onto the room's main screen. Based on their physiology and the brief glimpse we got of their ship interiors, they appear to be from low-gravity worlds with stable climates. Their technology is clearly advanced, but their entire approach suggests they've never fought a real war. "What do you mean?" asked Admiral Campbell. "Look at how they announced themselves," Elena explained. "They gave us a formal ultimatum with a specific deadline. They're following rules, like this is some kind of legal proceeding. A species that had evolved through warfare would have simply attacked." Colonel Danny Torres, the highest-ranking Marine, in the room, stood up from his seat. "With respect, Doctor, it doesn't matter how they evolved. They have 500 ships, and we have maybe 50 that could put up any kind of fight. But we have something they don't," Elena continued. "We evolved on Earth. They call it a death world, and they're right. Our planet has tried to kill us. For millions of years, with ice ages, volcanoes, earthquakes, and predators, it'll survive by becoming the most adaptable, persistent species on the planet." President Hamilton looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. "Colonel Torres, what's your assessment of our chances in a fight?" The Marine colonel was quiet for a long moment. "Normally, I'd say we have no chance, but these aliens made a mistake. They told us we're from death worlds, and they're afraid. Of what that means, maybe they should be." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was never really in doubt. Humanity had spent centuries fighting their way off their hostile planet and across the galaxy. They had survived ice ages, world wars, and the harsh reality of space exploration. They would not surrender now. As the meeting broke up, Jake Morrison received new orders aboard the Defiance. All human military vessels were to prepare for combat operations. The 72-hour deadline would not be met with surrender, but with defiance. The message went out to every human world on all frequencies. The response was the same everywhere, from the ice miners of Europa to the farmers of New Texas. Humanity would fight for their freedom, no matter the cost. War Prime Kethfer received the human response exactly 72 hours after his ultimatum. It was brief and delivered by President Hamilton herself. "The human species rejects your demands. Our worlds are not for sale, and our freedom is not negotiable. If you want a war, you'll get one." The die was cast. The most peaceful species in the galaxy was about to learn why evolution had made humans the ultimate survivors. The silence in space was broken by the flash of weapons fire as the first battle of the war began. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as 3 Zephyrian scout ships approached the Mars colony of New Phoenix. The alien vessels moved in perfect formation, their blue hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. "All weapons ready, Captain," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the tension in her. shoulders. This was the moment they had all been training for, but none of them had ever fought aliens before. "Wait for my command," Jake said, studying the enemy ships on his display. They were smaller than the massive vessels that had delivered the ultimatum, but still twice the size of the Defiance. Each one bristled with weapons that glowed with an eerie blue light. The Zephyrian ships opened fire first, sending beams of plasma energy racing toward the human vessel. Jake felt the ship shake as the shields absorbed the impact, but they held. The aliens were powerful, but their shots were predictable, following precise patterns that seemed almost mechanical. "Return fire," Jake ordered, and the Defiance's particle beams lanced out toward the enemy. The shots struck the lead alien ship, causing its shields to flicker. But the vessel continued its approach without changing course. "They're not even trying to avoid our weapons," Amy observed, her fingers working frantically at her controls. "It's like they're following a script." Jake watched as the alien ships continued their steady advance, firing at regular intervals and maintaining their formation. There was something almost ceremonial about the way they fought, as if they were performing a ritual rather than engaging in combat. "All fighters, launch now," Jake commanded into his communication unit. "Hit them fast and hard." Lieutenant Amy Foster led the fighter squadron away from the Defiance, her heart pounding as she guided her small ship toward the enemy formation. Behind her, 11 other pilots followed in tight formation, their weapons charged and ready. The Zephyrian ships turned to face the incoming fighters, their weapons tracking the small human craft with mechanical precision. But as Amy led her squadron into a wild spiral that sent them spinning between the alien vessels, she noticed something important. "They can't handle unpredictable movement," she called out over the radio. "They're trying to calculate our flight path, but we're not following any pattern." Amy rolled her fighter into a dive that should have been impossible, pulling forces that would have knocked out most pilots. But humans had evolved on a high-gravity world. Their bodies could handle stress that would kill most alien species. The Zephyrian weapons fired where Amy's fighter should have been, but she was already somewhere else, weaving through their formation like a bird dodging through trees. Her wingman, Lieutenant Tony Garcia, followed her lead, spinning his fighter in a corkscrew pattern that sent the alien gunners into confusion. "Target their engines," Amy ordered, and the human fighters opened fire on the alien ship's drive systems. The Zephyrians had powerful shields, but they were designed to stop direct attacks, not the chaotic assault that came from 12 different directions at once. The first alien ship lost power and began to drift, its engines dead. The second ship tried to retreat, but Amy's squadron surrounded it, firing from all sides until its shields collapsed. The third ship managed to destroy 2 human fighters before Lieutenant Garcia rammed it with his damaged craft, taking both ships down in a ball of fire. On the surface of Mars, the invasion was not going as smoothly as the Zephyrians had planned. General Patrick Stone crouched behind the rubble of what had been a shopping center in New Phoenix, watching as alien soldiers moved through the streets. The creatures were tall and thin, wearing environmental suits that protected them from the Martian atmosphere. "They're afraid of the environment," Stone whispered into his radio. "Look at those suits. They can't breathe our air, and they're moving like they've never been in low gravity before." The Zephyrian soldiers advanced in perfect lines, their weapons sweeping back and forth in measured patterns. They moved like they were on parade, not like they were fighting a war. General Stone had spent 30 years in the military, and he had never seen anything like it. "Second platoon, hit them from the flanks," Stone ordered. "Use the ruins for cover and keep moving. Don't let them predict where you're going to be." The human soldiers scattered through the destroyed city, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They had grown up in places like this, learning to fight in urban environments where every building could be a fortress and every street could become a trap. Sergeant Mike Thompson led his squad through the basement of a collapsed apartment building, emerging behind the alien formation. The Zephyrians had advanced past their position, assuming the humans would retreat in the face of superior firepower. "Now," Thompson whispered, as his squad opened fire with conventional weapons that should have been useless against alien technology. But the Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. The alien soldiers tried to turn and return fire, but they were caught in a crossfire between Thompson's squad and the main human force. Their energy weapons were powerful, but they needed clear shots to be effective. In the chaos of urban combat, with bullets coming from every direction, where superior technology meant nothing, Thompson watched as 3 alien soldiers felled a simple rifle fire. Their suits were advanced, but they were designed for controlled environments, not the brutal reality of combat on a death world. A bullet through the helmet was just as deadly to an alien as it was to a human. The breakthrough came when Thompson's squad reached an abandoned construction site. The Zephyrians had set up a command post there, using their advanced equipment to coordinate the invasion. But they had not expected humans to fight like animals, using every dirty trick they could think of. "Bring down that building," Thompson ordered, and his demolition expert planted charges on the support columns. The Zephyrians tried to stop them, but they were too late. The building collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris, crushing the alien command post and cutting off communication with their ships back in space. Captain Morrison watched as more Zephyrian ships approached Mars. The aliens had called for reinforcements. After losing their scout vessels, and now a full battle fleet was heading toward the planet. "Captain, we're outnumbered 10-1, reported Amy Foster, who had returned from the fighter battle with half her squadron lost. "Our weapons barely scratch their shields, and they have enough firepower to turn Mars into glass." Jake studied the tactical display, watching as the alien ships took up positions around the planet.
Ow.
They moved with the same mechanical precision as before, forming a perfect sphere that would allow them to bombard every human settlement simultaneously. "They're still following their rules," Jake muttered, an idea forming in his mind. "Amy, remember how confused they got when you broke formation? What if we do something they can't predict?" "What did you have in mind, Captain?" Jake smiled grimly. "We're going to do something no sane military officer would ever do. We're going to ram them." The Defiance accelerated toward the alien fleet, its engines pushing the ship to maximum speed. The Zephyrians opened fire, their plasma beams reaching out to destroy the approaching human vessel. But Jake was not flying in a straight line. The ship twisted and rolled through space, following no pattern that the alien computers could calculate. Jake's hands flew over the controls, his reflexes honed by years of flying in dangerous conditions. He was doing what every human pilot learned to do, flying by instinct rather than logic. The Zephyrian flagship loomed ahead, its massive hull bristling with weapons. Jake aimed the Defiance directly at the alien ship's bridge, pushing his engines beyond their safety limits. At the last second, he fired every weapon the ship had, pouring energy into the alien vessel's shields. The shields collapsed just as the Defiance struck the flagship. The human ship was destroyed in the collision, but it took the alien command vessel with it. Without their flagship, the Zephyrian fleet fell into confusion, their perfect formation breaking apart on Mars. General Stone watched as alien ships began to retreat from orbit. The loss of their command structure had thrown the entire invasion into chaos. For the first time since the war began, the Zephyrians were acting like they were actually in a fight. "Sir, we're getting reports from all over the planet," reported his communication officer. "The aliens are pulling back from every major city. They're regrouping at their landing sites." Stone nodded grimly. The aliens had learned their first lesson about fighting humans. Superior technology was not enough when facing an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. The war was just beginning. But humanity had sent a clear message to the Zephyrian collective. Earth's children would not go quietly into the night. They would fight with every weapon at their disposal. They would use every advantage their harsh homeworld had given them in the ruins of New Phoenix. Sergeant Thompson watched as alien troops retreated toward their ships. The creatures moved differently now, their heads turning constantly as they watched for attacks from every direction. They had learned that humans were not like other species they had conquered. "What now?" Sergeant asked one of his soldiers. 3 months had passed since the first battle at Mars, and the war had spread across 12 star systems. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the new battleship UES Vengeance, studying reports from human colonies across the galaxy. The Zephyrians controlled space, but they were learning that conquering human worlds was much harder than they had expected. "Sir, we're getting another distress call from Kepler 442, reported Commander Kate Sullivan, his new operations officer. "The colonists there have been under siege for 6 weeks, but they're still holding out." Jake nodded grimly. The planet, in the Kepler system, was one of humanity's newer colonies, home to 50,000 settlers who had been trying to terraform the hostile world when the war began. The Zephyrians had landed there expecting an easy victory, but they had found something very different. "What's the situation there?" Jake asked, pulling up the tactical display. "The planet is a nightmare, sir," Kate replied, reading from her report. "Constant acid rain, electrical storms every few hours, and the native wildlife is extremely aggressive. The colonists have turned it all into weapons." Jake smiled despite the grim news. Kepler 442 was exactly the kind of world that humans seemed to thrive on, while more civilized species found it uninhabitable. The colonists there were some of the toughest people in human space, and they were proving it every day. On the surface of Kepler 442, Commander Kate Sullivan crouched in a makeshift bunker carved into the side of a mountain. Around her, civilian colonists worked alongside military personnel to maintain their defenses. The air outside was toxic, the rain could burn through metal, and the temperature swung from freezing to boiling within hours. "The aliens tried another assault on the eastern settlement this morning," reported Bill Jackson, former mining engineer, who had become one of their best tactical planners. "They lasted about 20 minutes before their equipment started failing." Kate peered through the reinforced window at the alien camp in the valley below. The Zephyrians had established a base there 2 months ago, but they had to constantly repair their equipment as the planet's environment ate away at their technology. "Their environmental suits can't handle the acid," said Dr. Maria Santos, the colony's chief medical officer. "We captured one of their soldiers yesterday, and his breathing apparatus was completely corroded. They're dying just from being here." The colonists had quickly learned to use their hostile environment as a weapon. When the Zephyrians tried to advance, the humans would redirect streams of acid water to flood their paths. When alien aircraft flew overhead, the colonists would time their attacks to coincide with the electrical storms that fried alien electronics. Movement in Sector 7 called out Tommy Chen, a teenager who had become their best scout. "Like they're trying to reach the water treatment plant again." Kate grabbed her rifle and headed for the tunnel system that connected their bunkers. The colonists had dug these passages through solid rock, creating a network that allowed them to move around the planet without being detected by alien sensors. The water treatment plant was crucial to the colony's survival, but it was also the perfect place for an ambush. The Zephyrians needed to capture it to secure clean water for their troops. But they had to cross 3 kilometers of open ground, where acid rain fell constantly. Kate reached the plant, just as the alien soldiers began their advance. There were about 40 of them, moving in their usual precise formation.
Wow.
Their environmental suits gleamed in the dim light. But Kate could see the corrosion damage that was already eating away at the metal. "Wait for the storm," Kate whispered into her radio. She had learned to read the planet's weather patterns. She could feel the electrical buildup in the air. That meant lightning was coming. The first bolt of lightning struck just as the aliens reached the halfway point. The electrical discharge overloaded their communication systems, leaving them deaf and blind in the middle of the toxic wasteland. That was when the humans attacked. Kate and her team emerged from hidden positions around the plant, firing conventional weapons at the confused aliens. The Zephyrians tried to return fire, but their energy weapons were malfunctioning in the electrical storm. Several of their soldiers fell as their suits failed, poisoned by the planet's atmosphere. "Fall back to the caves," Kate ordered as more lightning began to strike. The humans retreated through passages that the aliens could not follow, leaving the Zephyrians stranded in the storm. By the time the weather cleared, half the alien assault force was dead. The survivors stumbled back to their base, their equipment damaged, and their morale broken. Kate watched them go, knowing that each failed attack made the aliens more afraid of the world they were trying to conquer. Back on Earth, Dr. Alina Rodriguez worked in her laboratory, analyzing data from battlefields across human space. She had been studying the Zephyrians for months, trying to understand how a species that had ruled the galaxy for so long could be struggling against primitive human forces. The key is in their evolution, she explained to Admiral Campbell during their weekly briefing. The Zephyrians evolved on garden worlds with stable climates and abundant resources. They never had to adapt to changing conditions or fight for survival. Admiral Campbell leaned back in his chair, studying the charts Alina had prepared. You're saying they don't know how to improvise? Exactly. Their military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and technological superiority. They expect their enemies to surrender when faced with superior firepower. But humans don't think that way. Alina pulled up a video from one of the recent battles. It showed human soldiers using captured alien equipment in ways that made no sense to military logic. They were welding alien energy weapons to conventional vehicles, using alien communication devices as improvised bombs, and turning alien medical equipment into torture devices. Look at this, Alina said, pointing to a clip of Sergeant Mike Thompson's squad. They're using alien gravity manipulators to collapse buildings on enemy positions. The Zephyrians designed those devices for construction work, not warfare. And that works? Campbell asked. Better than our own weapons in many cases. The aliens can't defend against attacks they never imagined. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, not falling buildings or redirected rivers. Alina switched to another video, this one from a mining colony where the residents had weaponized their industrial equipment. These colonists are using mining lasers to cut through alien armor. They're using terraforming equipment to change the local weather patterns. They're turning their entire planet into a weapon. Campbell shook his head in amazement. No wonder the aliens are having trouble. It gets worse for them, Alina continued. Every human world they attack becomes a training ground for us. We're learning their weaknesses, adapting our tactics, and sharing that information with other colonies. The breakthrough came when Private Jimmy Clark led a mission into the abandoned mines beneath New Birmingham Colony. The settlement had been evacuated when the Zephyrians invaded. But the colonists had left behind a network of tunnels that stretched for hundreds of kilometers underground. Jimmy was a former coal miner from Earth, and he knew underground passages better than most people, knew their own homes. When the aliens landed and began searching the empty buildings above, Jimmy led a team of volunteers into the darkness below. They're right above us, Jimmy whispered, listening to the sound of alien footsteps echoing through the tunnel roof. About 40 of them, moving in standard search formation. The aliens had followed human life signs into the mine system, confident that their superior technology would give them the advantage in underground combat. But they had never fought in tunnels dug by humans for human purposes. Jimmy led his team through passages that were barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, navigating by memory and instinct through the absolute darkness. The aliens followed, their energy weapons lighting up the tunnels, but they were loud and clumsy in the confined space. Here, Jimmy said, stopping at a junction where 5 tunnels met. This is where we make our stand. The aliens arrived 20 minutes later, their lights cutting through the darkness as they searched for the human fighters. But Jimmy's team was ready for them. The first explosive charge brought down the main tunnel, trapping half the alien force behind tons of rock. The second charge flooded the lower passages with toxic water from an underground stream. The third charge collapsed the ceiling. Burying the alien command team, Jimmy and his volunteers escaped through emergency passages that the aliens did not know existed. Behind them, the Zephyrian regiment was trapped in a maze of flooded tunnels and collapsed passages. Most of them died in the darkness, poisoned by toxic gases or crushed by falling rocks. The survivors who made it back to the surface told their commanders that fighting humans underground was impossible. The creatures seemed to see in the dark, navigate by instinct, and use the environment as a weapon. They were not soldiers, the aliens reported, but some kind of underground predators. Warprime Kethfer received the reports from his commanders. With growing frustration, the invasion that should have been finished in days had stretched into months, and his forces were no closer to victory than when they started. The war entered its second year with humanity still fighting on dozens of worlds. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the engineering bay of the UES Vengeance, watching Chief Engineer Paul Martinez work on a captured Zephyrian weapon. The alien device hummed with energy, its blue glow casting strange shadows on the walls. "I think I've figured out how their shields work," Paul said, wiping grease from his hands. "They use a frequency modulation system that rotates every few seconds. But if we can match that frequency and send it back at them, their own shields will tear their ships apart." Jake nodded, studying the complicated device. Paul had been working on captured alien technology for months, trying to find weaknesses that human forces could exploit. So far, they had learned to disrupt Zephyrian communications and overload their power systems. But this could be the breakthrough they needed. "How long will it take to build one of these devices for our ships?" Jake asked. "Give me 2 weeks and I'll have a prototype ready," Paul replied. "But we're going to need more alien equipment to study." The good news is, they keep leaving it behind when they retreat across the galaxy, on the research station, orbiting Earth. Dr. Alina Rodriguez made a discovery that would change everything. She had been studying biological samples from captured Zephyrian soldiers, trying to understand their physiology and find new ways to fight them. "Their immune systems are completely different from ours," she explained to Admiral Campbell over a secure video link. "They evolved on worlds with very few diseases, so they never developed strong natural defenses." Admiral Campbell leaned forward in his chair. "Are you saying they're vulnerable to our germs?" "More than vulnerable. I tested samples of common Earth bacteria against Zephyrian tissue. The results were devastating. A simple cold virus could kill them within hours." Alina pulled up her test results on the screen. "Their medical technology can handle most galactic diseases, but they have no defense against Earth pathogens. We've been fighting them with guns and explosives when we should have been fighting them with biology." The first biological attack was launched by Captain Betty Johnson during a boarding operation on a Zephyrian supply ship. Betty led a team of Marines onto the alien vessel, carrying containers of what appeared to be normal supplies but were actually filled with Earth-based bacteria. "Remember, don't breathe the same air as them for more than a few minutes," Betty warned her team as they moved through the alien corridors. "But we're immune to this stuff, but it will kill them." The Zephyrian crew tried to resist the human boarding party, but within an hour, they began falling ill. Their advanced medical systems could not identify the alien pathogens that were attacking their bodies. Betty's team captured the ship without firing another shot, as the alien crew became too sick to fight. Word of the biological weapons spread quickly through human forces. Soon, every human soldier carried samples of Earth's bacteria into battle. Zephyrians found their troops falling ill after every encounter with humans, and their medical officers could not understand what was happening. On the ground, human forces had learned to combine alien technology with their own brutal tactics. Sergeant Tony Garcia led a unit that had become experts at using captured Zephyrian equipment, but they used it in ways the aliens never intended. "Load the gravity disruptor with those metal fragments," Tony ordered his demolition expert. "When the aliens come around that corner, we're going to give them a surprise." The device was designed for construction work, meant to move heavy objects safely and precisely. Tony's team had turned it into a weapon, loading it with sharp metal pieces and setting it to reverse gravity in a small area. When the Zephyrian patrol rounded the corner, they walked into a trap that no civilized species would have thought to create. The gravity disruptor activated, sending hundreds of metal fragments flying at lethal speed. The alien soldiers, expecting energy weapons or explosives, had no defense against such a primitive attack. Their armor is designed to stop plasma beams, not flying junk, Tony explained to his team as they collected the alien equipment. "We keep thinking like scavengers instead of soldiers, and they can't figure out how to fight us." The decisive moment came in the Proxima Centauri system, where the Zephyrians decided to make their final push against humanity. War Prime Kethver assembled the largest fleet in Zephyrian history, over 200 ships, for an assault on the human colony of Haven Prime. Admiral Morrison knew that this would be humanity's greatest test. His fleet of 30 ships was outnumbered 7-1. But he had learned something important about fighting the Zephyrians. They expected their enemies to behave logically, and humans had given up on logic months ago. "All ships, prepare for Operation Chaos," Jake broadcast to his fleet. "Remember, they want us to fight like civilized beings. Instead, we're going to fight like the animals they think we are." The human ships scattered as the Zephyrian fleet approached, breaking every rule of space combat tactics. Instead of forming defensive lines or fighting formations, they spread out randomly across the star system, moving in patterns that made no strategic sense. "Sir, the human fleet is retreating in all directions," reported General Vexstar to Warprime Kethfer. "They appear to have lost all tactical coordination." Gethfar studied the display, watching as human ships fled toward asteroids, moons, and empty space. "Follow them. Destroy each ship individually. This is our chance to end their resistance." As the Zephyrian ships spread out to chase the fleeing humans, they walked into the trap that Jake had prepared. The human ships were not retreating. They were positioning themselves for an attack that no military academy would have taught. The UES Vengeance emerged from behind a large asteroid, its new frequency disruptor weapon fully charged. Jake had used the scattered retreat to get his ship into position behind the Zephyrian flagship, where its massive shields could not protect it. "Fire," Jake ordered, and the disruptor beam struck the alien ship. The Zephyrian shields tried to deflect the attack, but the frequency matched their own defensive systems perfectly. The shields collapsed inward, crushing the flagship like an empty can around the system. Other human ships emerged from their hiding places, using Paul Martinez's new weapons to tear apart the confused Zephyrian fleet. The aliens tried to reform their battle lines, but the humans kept moving, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. On Haven Prime, Colonel Paul Martinez had spent months preparing the planet's defenses. The Zephyrians had studied human colony layouts and expected to find standard military fortifications. Instead, they found something that looked like the product of a diseased imagination. The humans had turned the entire planet into a weapon. Rivers had been diverted to create acid swamps. Mountains had been hollowed out and filled with explosives. Even the local wildlife had been trained to attack anything that smelled like aliens. "They're landing in Sector 12, reported Captain Lisa Adams from her command post. "Right where we wanted them." The Zephyrian ground forces expected resistance, but they found something much worse. The humans had created an environment that seemed designed by demons, where every step could trigger a trap and every breath might be poisonous. The alien soldiers advanced through what appeared to be a normal forest, but the trees had been injected with Earth's bacteria that made them toxic to alien physiology. The ground beneath their feet was unstable, riddled with tunnels that could collapse at any moment. Even the air was dangerous, filled with microscopic organisms that attacked alien respiratory systems. "Fall back to the landing site," ordered the Zephyrian ground commander after losing half his force in the first hour. "This planet is not suitable for invasion." But the humans were not finished with them yet. As the aliens retreated, they found that their landing site had been transformed. Human engineers had used captured gravity manipulators to create quicksand pits around the alien ships. The Zephyrians found themselves trapped on a world that was actively trying to kill them, in space. The battle was turning into a disaster. For the Zephyrian fleet, their superior technology meant nothing against human tactics that defied all logic. Ships that should have retreated instead rammed alien vessels. Weapons designed for construction work were being used to tear apart alien hulls. Even their communications were being jammed by devices that played human music at deafening volumes. Warprime Kethfer watched from his command ship as his fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Their ships are inferior. Their weapons are primitive. They should have been defeated months ago." "I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood the human species," replied General Vexstar. "They do not fight to win battles. They fight to survive, and they will use any method necessary to achieve that goal." The Zephyrian fleet began to retreat from the Proxima system, leaving behind over 100 destroyed ships. It was their first major defeat in 10,000 years of galactic dominance, and it had been inflicted by a species they considered barely civilized. On Haven Prime, the surviving alien ground forces surrendered after 3 days of fighting an enemy they could not see or understand. The final phase of the war began 6 months after the victory at Proxima Centauri. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the largest human fleet ever assembled prepared to leave Earth's solar system for 2 years. Humanity had fought a defensive war, but now they were ready to take the fight to the enemy. The human fleet had grown to over 100 vessels, many of them built using captured Zephyrian technology combined with human engineering. They were not the most advanced ships in the galaxy, but they were crewed by the most determined fighters. "Set course for the Zephyrian border worlds," Jake ordered. It's time they learned what it feels like to be invaded. The first target was Serenity 7, a peaceful Zephyrian colony that had never known war. The planet was home to 3 million aliens who lived in cities that looked more like art projects than defensive positions. Beautiful towers reached toward the sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. Gardens filled every open space, and the entire world had the feeling of a paradise. Captain Lucy Adams led the assault force that landed on the planets. Surface, she had been fighting the Zephyrians for 2 years, watching them destroy human colonies and kill innocent civilians. Now it was their turn to experience the terror of invasion. "Remember, we're not here to slaughter civilians," Lucy told her troops as they prepared to advance on the alien capital. "But we are here to show them that their peaceful worlds are not safe as long as they threaten ours." The Zephyrian defenders were unprepared for human tactics. They had built their defenses according to civilized rules of warfare, expecting their enemies to attack military targets and avoid civilian areas. But humans had learned to fight dirty, using every advantage they could find. Lucy's forces moved through the city like a natural disaster, striking at power plants, communication centers, and government buildings with surgical precision. The Zephyrian military tried to respond, but they had never trained for urban combat against an enemy that ignored all conventional tactics. Within 3 days, Serenity 7 had surrendered. The human forces had captured the planet without destroying its infrastructure or harming large numbers of civilians. But they had demonstrated something terrifying to the Zephyrian mind. Their perfect, peaceful world could be conquered by creatures they considered barely civilized. News of the fall of Serenity 7 spread panic throughout the Zephyrian collective. For 10,000 years, their garden worlds had been safe behind the protection of their mighty fleet. The idea that primitive Deathworld creatures could threaten their homes was almost incomprehensible. War Prime. Kethfer faced the most serious crisis of his career. Reports were coming in from across Zephyrian space of human raids on border colonies. The attacks were not random acts of violence, but carefully planned operations that targeted the collective's ability to continue the war. "Sir, we have lost contact with 3 more colonies in the outer systems," reported General Vextar during their daily briefing. "The humans appear to be targeting our supply lines and communication networks." Kethfer studied the tactical display, watching as red markers appeared wherever human forces had struck. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The humans were not trying to conquer Zephyrian worlds. They were demonstrating that they could reach any target they chose. "How many of our officers have requested transfers away from the front lines?" Kethfer asked. Vextar hesitated before answering. "Nearly half the fleet command staff, sir. Many of them claim they are suffering from stress disorders caused by fighting the humans." Kethfer was not surprised. Fighting humans had proven to be unlike any military experience in Zephyrian history. The creatures seemed immune to fear, capable of turning any situation to their advantage, and willing to die for causes that made no logical sense. "Sir, Perhaps it is time to consider negotiating with them, Vexstar suggested carefully. Our forces are demoralized, and every engagement with the humans results in casualties we cannot replace. On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been appointed. As humanity's chief diplomat for alien relations, she had spent months studying Zephyrian psychology, trying to understand how a species that had ruled the galaxy for so long could be brought to the negotiating table. The key is showing them that we are not the savage animals they think we are, Lena explained to President Hamilton during a briefing at the United Nations building. They need to understand that humans can be reasonable, but only when we are treated with respect. What do you suggest? President Hamilton asked. We need to demonstrate our capabilities without destroying their civilization. Show them that we could wipe out their worlds if we wanted to, but that we choose not to. Make them realize that negotiation is in their best interest. The demonstration came when Admiral Morrison led the human fleet to the Zephyrian homeworld. Itself, the planet was the heart of their civilization, home to 10 billion aliens and protected by the most powerful defenses in the galaxy. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace just outside the planet's defensive perimeter, their weapons powered but not targeting anything. It was a message that could not be misunderstood. Humanity had the power to attack the Zephyrian homeworld, but they were choosing to talk instead. This is Admiral Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. Jake broadcast on all frequencies. We are not here to attack your world. We are here to prove a point we can reach any target in your space at any time we choose. Question is whether you want to continue this war or discuss peace. On the planet's surface, billions of Zephyrians watched as human ships hung in their sky like birds of prey. For the first time in their species' history, their homeworld was threatened by an alien fleet. The psychological impact was devastating. Warprime Kethver stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring at the human vessels that had appeared. In his home system, the ships were smaller than his own. Their technology was inferior, but they had done something no enemy had ever managed. They had brought war to the Zephyrian homeworld. Sir, the human admiral is requesting permission to land a diplomatic team, reported his communication officer. Kethver considered his options. He could order an attack on the human fleet, but the cost would be enormous. His forces were tired, demoralized, and afraid of fighting an enemy that defied all logic. More importantly, the humans had proven they could strike anywhere in Zephyrian space. Grant them permission, Kethver decided, but maintain full defensive readiness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez landed on the Zephyrian homeworld with a small diplomatic team, becoming the first human to set foot on the planet that ruled a galactic empire. She was escorted to the capital city, where she would meet with the collective's leadership in a building that stood for thousands of years. The meeting took place in a chamber designed to intimidate alien visitors. With soaring ceilings and walls covered in displays of Zephyrian military might, but Elena was not intimidated. She had grown up on a world where the environment itself tried to kill anything that lived there. Warprime Kethver, Elena said. As she entered the chamber, I bring greetings from the human species and an offer of peace. Kethver studied the small human female who stood before him. She was tiny compared to his own imposing height, but there was something in her eyes that reminded him of the human soldiers, who had been tearing apart his forces for 2 years. You have caused great damage to our civilization, Kethver replied. Your species has proven to be more dangerous than we calculated. We never wanted this war, Elena said simply. You demanded our surrender, and we refused. Everything that followed was your choice, but you could have submitted to our authority. Your worlds would have been spared. Elena smiled, and Kethver felt a chill at the expression. You don't understand. Humans very well do you. We evolved on a world that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We learned to survive by never giving up, no matter how hopeless things seemed. Surrender is not in our nature. The negotiations continued for 3 days, with both sides working to find a solution that would end the war. The humans wanted recognition as a sovereign species with the right to their own worlds. The Zephyrians wanted assurance that humanity would not threaten other species in the galaxy. The agreement that emerged was called the Terran Accords. Humanity would be recognized as an independent civilization with full rights to their death worlds. In exchange, they would agree to limit their expansion and work with the Zephyrian collective to maintain galactic peace. Your species has taught us something important, Kethver admitted as the accords were signed. We believed that advanced technology and superior numbers would always triumph. But you have shown us that determination and adaptability can overcome any advantage. Alina nodded. We hope this is the beginning of a new relationship between our species. Humans have no desire to conquer the galaxy, but we will defend our freedom with everything we have. The war officially ended on a Tuesday, exactly 2 years and 4 months after it began. Across human space, celebrations erupted as news of the peace agreement spread. But the victory celebrations were subdued, marked by remembrance of all those who had died fighting for humanity's independence.